Welcome to RevHC's series Under the Codes, which is a series of interviews with healthcare professionals speaking about the issues that matter most in healthcare today and the market. Today we're lucky enough to have Karey Whitty, who is the managing director of Valtruis, an early stage equity investment shop in Nashville that's focused on solving the hard, difficult problems in the market. Karey has an extensive resume and history. I think we would make this a 2-hour podcast if I went detail by detail. I will say at a high level, you have been in the C-suite, CFO, COO, CEO of the payer side and the provider side, from early stage startups, middle market companies, public large corporate, and now sit on the private equity investment side. Founded and was co-founded one of the very first value-based care companies in the country, and is very much the topic we want to speak about today. Value-based care, risk-based care, all the various nomenclatures we have for this subsector, and you seem like the best person to be able to speak to it. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Wes. It's an honor to be here.
I think we're going to spend our time focused today around that value-based care conversation, where it sits. The market has been hot for that. We've continued to expand in it. There's a lot of new names that pop up. The payers are obviously interested. It feels like every day there's a couple of new VBC companies and a lot of sponsors moving in that direction. If I may ask, when you hear risk-based care, not the theory, but the reality, what comes to mind for you for that?
Yeah, I think, what's in a name, right? Risk-based care, value-based care, managed care, call it what you will. But I think at this point we are well beyond theory. I think there's no doubt this model is proven. We've proven it in select geographies. We've proven it in select patient populations in certain organizations. So, check that box. The theory is proven. I think where we are today, and where we have been and probably will continue to be is evolving, right? These models continue to evolve. Generally started out as a very primary care centric models. These have now evolved to more single specialty models, integrated delivery network models. So many variations of the model as we sit today as to where we started. But overall, I think some really good success, no doubt some big failures, and I think the entire industry has learned from those and will continue to only make us better.
Well, speaking to that, how do you define success in value-based care? Because there's a lot of perspectives. There's the payer's perspective, there's of course the patient's perspective, there's the investor's perspective. How do you look at success and how do you define it in that market?
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring up the patient, because at the end of the day, these models have to provide better patient care, period, end of story. And if that's not being achieved, then it's a failed model out of the gate. Beyond that, I measure success by a sustainable ability to bend the curve in the healthcare dollar, right? If you can't save the system money, if you don't have viable unit economics, if you can't provide better patient care, then it's not a model that's just going to succeed longer term in the marketplace. Anything can find success short term, but I think what we're trying to build are models that have longevity, that actually reduce the spend of the healthcare dollar and provide better patient care. So that's how I define success.
Yeah, and I understand it's an unfair question, but out of all these companies we see in the market doing it, how many of them do you think are taking that approach as a percent, or worse? Yeah,
good question. I mean, there's no doubt there are models that are built for quick hits, if you will, right? There was a period of time where the market was valuing these models on a multiple of revenue. So what did a lot of them do? You go out and grow your revenue fast, right? So you expand before you've got a proven clinical model. But if you're getting a multiple of revenue, that's where the market's pushing you. So I'm just going to grow my top line, and therefore I'm going to get rewarded for growth. I think that's obviously that didn't work, and I think the model now has, the market has reverted to, can this model generate cash? At the end of the day, if you have to be able to bend the curve, provide better patient care, but at the end of the day, you got to be able to make money in doing it, right? So if these models are not generating cash, there's no sustainability. So I think that's where all these models have to get to, is providing all of those three: better patient care, bending the curve, but ultimately generating cash, which I would suggest is the highlight of being a successful company.
Yeah, absolutely. So originally valued against revenue metrics, cash being the metric now of which they're trading, because you're going to incentivize what the behavior you want, or the market rather, to move it towards that.
Yeah.
For where it got out of the norms, you think it was just that incentive structure of how they were looking at exits, or do you think the model itself, and from either the dynamic from the equity investor or the payer, was bent in the wrong direction?
Yeah, definitely a combination. I mean, I think a lot of these models are built on risk coding, right? If you can adequately and appropriately code a population, that in and of itself can be a significant driver in performance. I think the reality is that is not. I think the market has proven, and now CMS, through what they have done with their recent, well, I wouldn't say recent, we're now in the third year of the V28 model, where they've amended the definitions of risk coding, right? So to make it harder to make money just on coding. So I think, plenty of these models were built just on improving coding of the patient, which if I code you appropriately, I'm going to get a higher premium dollar from either the payer if you're a downstream risk-based entity, or from CMS, for example. Works, but not sustainable long-term. And I think that's what you've seen of late in the marketplace, is those models that were built on kind of that single thread of coding. CMS came out and basically amended the model. I would suggest rightfully so. What they looked at was any patient with diabetes in the Medicare Advantage space was coded with complications. If a diabetic has complications, that's going to generate a higher premium dollar. The reality is that can't at all be true, right? Not every diabetic has, quote, complications. So they realized these coding fallacies, if you will. They've tightened it down, and I think that's now we're in a period where you have to have a sustainable clinical model. You have to have buy-in from your clinicians, great operating model, in order for these to be successful. So I think gone are the days where you can build a model, build a company, build success on the easy button, if you will.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, and that definitely, with that overcoding, I'm sure raised short-term cost up, which undermined one of your three pillars of the purpose of the entire market. Absolutely,
because technically in that scenario, I might argue you're actually adding to the cost. I mean, at the end of the day, we all want to be reimbursed for appropriateness, right? Where is that line? Maybe that line gets gray. I mean, at the end of the day, these companies, generally speaking, you, CMS, you, whomever, you make the rules, I'll play by the rules. And that's what companies did, right? I played by the rules, but now the rules have changed. So I think we're in a better spot, which is going to force all of these companies to generate clinical models that are sustainable.
Mm-hmm. It feels like the first adopters in this market are the stories we tell about who's done it the best. NaviHealth, your company, and others had a passionate, talented, entrepreneurial, creative mindset when they approached it, when they approached the payers, when they approached the market, the providers, to deliver this care. The examples of success tend to be the early ones, and we have, on the other end of the spectrum, examples that are more recent where it's kind of fallen apart.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that and recognize it? And what is the causality of that behavior?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. You specifically mentioned NaviHealth, proud experience in my career. I think we, as a company, did great things, and I think we did exactly what I was describing earlier. This was focused on post-acute care. I think we saw an opportunity to, quote, bend the curve again in the healthcare dollar and post-acute. IRF, LTAC, skilled nursing, home health, et cetera, was kind of our bucket of risk. So we went to market and built a company focused exclusively on those care sites. Yeah, great success. I think we went about it in the right way. I think we built it with great intention to provide that better patient care, to save money to the system. But there's no doubt there are early models that tried and failed. I mean, we're sitting in Nashville, home of Ficor. I don't know if you remember that name.
Oh, yeah.
That was one of the early companies, right? Ficor was going to the moon. We also thought so. Their model was basically to go in and buy a primary care group, buy down their earnings, put a physician group on salary, and tell them to go back out and provide care just like they always had. The reality is they took money out of the physician's pocket, And that's where the problems became, right? You split the incentive for the physician who is now on a salary, and it's human behavior, right? They didn't work as hard. Saw 6 patients per day versus 12. Why? Because I'm going to make the same amount of money if I see 6 or I see 12. Human nature, right? So busted model, went into bankruptcy. So check, learn from that, right? You can't buy down earnings and expect physicians and clinicians to act as they would under a fee-for-service model. So I think at the end of the day, what that really taught all of us was physician alignment. At the end of the day, you have to have physician buy-in, and without physician buy-in, I don't think any of these models are going to be successful. So I think that's paramount to any of these models.
Well said. Yeah, I think every healthcare roll-up, of which this town is probably the headquarters for most, changed the way they do business after, or uses Quickfire as the base case for
Absolutely.
how they do business.
I mean, it's sad. We've got some friends. I have some dear friends that were there, but we all learned a lot from it. And you mentioned roll-up. I've been associated with an entity that did roll-ups. I think that's a tough model. I think, at the end of the day, private equity does these roll-ups. No one really wants to take the time and, more importantly, money to do integrations. So you end up, I stepped into an organization that had 35 rev cycle systems when I walked in, right? Neither of them talked to one another. Every data extract said something different. Impossible way to run a company. But roll-ups work, but you have to pay the piper. You have to do integration. You have to get on the same systems. And I think very few companies out there really had the discipline to do that.
Well said. I think we've seen, since the interest rates have climbed up on debt and there's been a slower turnover where you're not just passing the torch, you can tell who did not integrate because their survivability is in question.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, back to value-based care. I mean, healthcare is a huge market. Third biggest economy in the world is the American healthcare system. So when you look at the amount of talent and thought that goes into doing value-based care or risk-based models correctly, how scalable is it? How many niches are there in the market? How many players can participate and compete and not force each other to a race to the bottom and rates that compromise care?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think there's no doubt the model has evolved. It started out very heavy and still exists in great degree primary care centric, right? We've graduated from those models to be even specialty centric, right? So you've got MSK models, you've got cancer care models, you have kidney care models, right? Specialty specific. Because I think what we've learned throughout our history is primary care, while is at the pinnacle of care delivery, at the end of the day, it's sometimes a challenge once that patient walks outside the primary care walls. To see a specialist, you kind of lose control. So enter these single specialty models, right? And they all work pretty well together. Now, part of the issue is if I'm a payer and I've downstream risk to a primary care group, now I've got a kidney care company knocking on my door, but I've already outsourced risk to the primary care group. How do I split that dollar appropriately so that I'm not paying for the same service twice? So we've added some complications to the market, there's no doubt. But I think we've seen these models work. South Florida, great example, right? Medicare Advantage, high reimbursement rates in South Florida. That's been the case for a long time. Lots of coding. So, an average patient, Medicare Advantage patient in South Florida may be coded at a 2x, whereas, a standard fee-for-service 65-year-old patient may be like a 0.85, just to give you an example, right? The South Florida models were, I'll say, very patient-centric, population-centric, right? Given the South Florida geography, right? We saw companies trying to expand those models into other geographies. So I'm going to take my South Florida heavy Spanish-speaking model, and I'm going to go to Denver. Doesn't work, right? So I think the discipline lies in, these models are going to continue to grow. They're going to continue to excel. I'm a firm believer in the model. A firm believer, if done right, it does everything that I've talked about. It does bend the curve. It does provide better patient care. But I think we have to, the harsh reality is it's not going to work in every market. It's not going to work in every population. Every organization is not going to be successful. To your point, there are, countless organizations out there, startups. We're guilty. We launched startups, couple of a year it seems, trying to do something different, right? I think innovation is extremely important to healthcare. We've got to find ways to deliver better care cheaper, right? At the end of the day, innovation is at the forefront of doing this. We're going to see some failures, and we're going to learn from that. So I think where we are today is, we've had a history of successes, we've had a history of failures. We've got to recognize it's not going to work in every market. You can't be all things to all people. In the book Good to Great, the author talks about the hedgehog concept, right? What is your hedgehog? Which is one thing you do myopically well, and very few companies are able to have the discipline to actually live by that.
Well, you just that was the magic word I was thinking the whole time, discipline. Like, there has to be real discipline in ownership and management team, despite the laws, despite the rules, to stay within those lanes and not think you can color outside of them for gain. I mean, I think a lot of the biggest risk to this market, value-based care risk models, similar to population health, or even teleradiology, where the competition drove the rates down to the point where there was no value behind it. How do you prevent that? How do you maintain discipline when we all culturally understand the equity investor's mindset in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is no single payer system, thankfully, in the U.S., right? So I think these models will continue to evolve. So I think there will continue to be competition. Much like, gosh, if you look back decades ago, how many publicly traded payers were there? I have no idea. Probably 15. I don't know, I'm just guessing. And through consolidation, how many publicly traded payers are there today, right? I mean,
we have an acronym, right?
We have an acronym.
We get them all.
Exactly, right? So there's no doubt you're going to see the same phenomenon in this value-based care space, right? Every company wants to grow. Every company wants to increase their success. These are reasonably capital-intensive models. So I think at the end of the day, you're going to see consolidation, right? Does a single specialty, is that the right way to go at the end of the day? Maybe, I don't know. But do we need 10 kidney care companies, knocking on the same doors? Probably not. So I think you're going to see some acquisitions, some consolidation, which is typical for any market, right? We saw it happen in the payers. You see it happen in the providers. It's going to happen in the same market, and I think that's a good thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, all right. The incentive structures that are out there, is there anything that can help mature this and accelerate some of your recommendations, either from the states or the payers or anywhere else? What type of external forces, which is a free market we like to avoid, but may offer some guardrails, would you see and recognize? Yeah,
I think a four-letter word for me is vendor. I've always hated the word vendor. Most of these companies, if not all, are working with payers, right? Taking downstream risk from the payer. The payer's an insurance company. These are not insurance companies. They're not licensed as insurance companies. However, they do take risk. I think a real danger, from my perspective, having sat on the payer side, having sat on the provider side, is when it's a true vendor relationship, right? What I think we all strive for is a partnership, right? And I think only and until you have that partnership with your payer partner are these models ultimately going to be successful. Data sharing, critical, right? Real-time data sharing, we don't even have to have that, but gosh, can we at least have weekly data sharing? Can we have bi-weekly data sharing, something? And I get all of the sensitivities with PHI and all that. I totally get that. But at the end of the day, if you're in a downstream risk, you have to be willing to share data for a company to be successful. So, a partnership, adequate data sharing policies, probably at least monthly meetings with the respective teams to talk about the goings on, what they're seeing in the marketplace, et cetera. So I think there can be a tighter bond between the payer and their downstream risk entity. On the government side, we have seen CMS historically launch many pilots. You mentioned NavHealth. NavHealth participated in the BPCI, Bundle for Payment Care Initiative, I think it was called.
Good job. That's a hard acronym to pull.
Which didn't survive at the end of the day. But you know what? Try, fail, try again. So kudos to CMS and CMMI for delivering these models to the marketplace to be innovative, to try new things. I think what's important in all of these pilots and all these models, they're going to be wrong. The feds, the way they set it up, are going to be wrong. The way the companies set up are going to be wrong. There has to be a willingness to allow failure, I would say respectfully on both sides, to where you've got to be able to meet in the middle. So CMMI under the NavHealth model, in their learning period, changed the rules in our favor to make the model worthwhile and sustainable. I think at the end of the day, when the feds bring something to market, I have to believe they genuinely want these models to be successful. It's not as if they're just trying to offload risk to some downstream entity and put them out of business. That is not the goal. So I think it's important for the feds to be malleable, if you will, on these models and reflect what's going on in the marketplace. We've seen so much fraud and abuse of late in wound care, right?
Yeah.
And I specifically call that wound care. It's just so obvious. It's extremely nauseating. And thankfully, CMS is going to cap the reimbursement rate for wound care January of this year. Great, right? We served it up. They did something. Check. That's a partnership, right? So I think that's an example of what needs to happen for all these models to be successful.
You make a great point. I mean, CMS might not move fast, but when they move, they tend to move in the right direction and solve the problems.
Yeah, that's right.
Not that quickly. You mentioned CMMI. I think Nashville's lucky enough to have some CMMI lead alumni, Bowler, Brad Smith, et cetera.
Yeah.
Have you seen that their entrepreneur mindset have an influence when they arrived at CMMI, their arrival here? What has that done to the market and their impact?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're blessed to have those names in our marketplace, right? I mean, those are the who's who of healthcare, trying to change and provide betterment to the system, no doubt. So, Adam and Brad specifically, you know, I can't imagine the purview that you have sitting in that seat, right? The number of people, the number of companies that are coming to present to you, to pitch their wares, to pitch their idea. I think it's a great venue, a great seat to see, to have a real lens of what's going on in the marketplace. So, you know, they both did great things. I think Brad was probably the first to bring a report card on CMMI and all of these the projects that CMI had launched, right? The harsh reality is what Brad revealed were very few of them actually saved money, and therefore very few of them survived, which is the right answer. If you can't save me money, if you're going to cost me money, this product, this pilot doesn't survive. So, you know, kudos to Brad for even getting that done. You know, what it brought for those guys coming back, Brad from here, Adam moving here, so much innovation, right? I mean, again, with the number of people knocking on your door, trying to see you, trying to pitch you when you're in that seat, and then having the ability to step out and invest in, commercialize, launch some of these ideas, some of these companies, I think it's been a great asset to the healthcare community here. I think both are showing great success, and certainly, you know, as a born and raised Nashvilleian, proud that they're here, and super excited about what this healthcare economy is becoming.
I agree and echo that. Do you think that report card, I mean, a lot of the questions I've asked are somewhat trying to recognize some of the criticality that's been pointed at value-based care, risk-based care, and it's largely come from that report card. How much did that change either on the investment side or their behaviors or awareness, because it was a freight train until that came out?
Yeah, I think it forced CMMI, and therefore CMS, to be more thoughtful, right? I don't think prior to Brad doing that, I don't think there was a real litmus test on what is and what is not being successful. You know, you've got some watchdogs that are paying attention, but a true internal report card on how we believe this product, this pilot is performing, you know, had not been done at scale, I'll just say that. So I do think it changed CMMI from a perspective that, you know, probably held them more accountable, right? We've, you know, at the end of the day, taxpayers want to know that their dollars are being spent wisely. And I think what Brad revealed was these dollars were not being spent wisely. These companies may or may not be making money. Maybe they're making money, but they're not actually bending the curve. To the contrary, they're actually adding cost to the system. Mm-hmm. That's a fail. So I think it made them more disciplined in what they brought to market. There was a lull, right? That we saw kind of a lull post that, where they just wanted to digest what was in the market. And I think now all of a sudden this year and even next. CMS has, gosh, I don't even know, 10 pilots that they're bringing to market. So, we're back in that heyday of let's throw some stuff to the wall and see what sticks, which is how innovation is going to work.
Yeah. Well, if I may ask, where do you see this sub-market 5-10 years from now? Like, are there a lot of changes? Is it just shaking out the underperformers? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. I mean, as I said in the opening, we're beyond theory. The models work. We know the model work. It's not always at scale. It's not always in every market, and it's not always with every population. So I think you'll see more. I hope we'll see more disciplined growth, right? I mean, there's I mentioned the revenue multiple period where, give me any contract and I'll take it. I think the ability to say no didn't exist at that time, right? Just give me the revenue, I'll figure out how to make money. Sometimes they didn't figure out how to make money. So I think more discipline, more focus, definitely consolidation. It's not going away, right? I think, the term value-based care is probably not in vogue right now because of some of the goings on in the marketplace. But again, call it what you will. I don't care what value-based care, risk-based entity, managed care, whatever, call it what you want. It's not going away because at the end of the day, I'm a believer the fee-for-service system is not the way that we're going to make our way out of this problem. I mean, under fee-for-service, our costs are just going to increase. Bill early, bill often. That's just the harsh reality of the fee-for-service system. So I think the only way we're going to fix this is having more entities, more individuals, more providers at risk. Under a risk product, behavior changes. It has to. Otherwise, you're not going to survive. So I think that we've already come to a point where Medicare Advantage MA product in count exceeds that of fee-for-service. Took us a long time to get there, but now all of a sudden, MA is larger than Medicare fee-for-service. We'll see how the numbers shake out in January. We still haven't seen all the enrollment numbers yet, but I expect that trend to continue to increase.
It seems like having people like you as either the owners or advisors or board members with the credibility of saying it was done right and this is how you do it might be the best validation tool without as many guardrails in place as you would expect.
Yeah. I mean, as I've said, there are plenty of models built just on the sheer willingness, sheer desire to make a buck. And you can make a buck short term. I think sustainability is the key, right? You can figure out how to make $1 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, but can you make $1 for 20 years, right? I mean, and I think that's where we have to get to. We have to get to sustainability. I realize it's easier said than done. CMS changes things, forces us to adjust. Payers change things. We're at the end of the day, generally these models are downstream risk providers, risk entities from the payers. What product did the payer put in the marketplace? How did they price it? What subsidies are they providing? All of those plays into the success and or failure. I think if we can just get to some stability in the marketplace, that will serve all of us well, which we've not seen for quite some time.
I agree. That's wonderful. Thank you. Shifting topics completely, as sharp as you are professionally with your background, I happen to know you're personally a wonderful person, up and down. JDRF, now known as Breakthrough T1D, is a personal passion, is a family, and in the market. You're on the national board there and have been really influential in their success. Can you share a little bit about what Breakthrough T1D has accomplished for that type 1 diabetes market, how it's bent the curve, so to speak, either in cost or changing lives or whatnot, and some of those results and values?
Sure, and thank you for mentioning that. Yes, my wife and I have 4 kids, 2 of whom have type 1 diabetes. So yes, we've been in this fight for a number of years now. Our daughter was diagnosed when she was 8 and she's now 28. So we've been at this fight for 20 years. Breakthrough T1D, as you mentioned, formerly known as JDRF, formerly known as Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, formerly known as JDF, Juvenile Diabetes Foundation, right? So it too has evolved, trying to ultimately get away from the quote juvenile element, because type 1 diabetes doesn't only live in kids, right? Type 1 lives in adults. So we've tried to evolve the branding and the model, and provide a more national reach. So JDRF meant nothing to Brussels, right? Pick a country, whatever. So we did some market research and found that the breakthrough resonated. So really what we're all about is providing life-changing breakthroughs in type 1 diabetes. Historically, I think we have been at the forefront of providing research for what has been generically called the artificial pancreas, right? This is a closed loop system whereby a glucose monitor talks to an insulin pump through Bluetooth. So hence the closed loop. So the insulin pump will realize that blood sugars are going high, it will automatically dose, for example. Realize blood sugar is going low, it will shut off insulin delivery, right? So artificial pancreas is not a true characterization per se, but I guess you get the point. So huge funder, researcher towards getting that artificial pancreas to market, which now many companies, both of my kids are on artificial pancreas. So this closed loop system. Drugs, Sanofi has a product called Tzield that has FDA approval, that we also provided funds for research. Tzield is a drug that actually delays the onset of type 1 diabetes up to 2 years, right? We can't stop the progression of T1D, but through this drug that is now available in the marketplace, we can slow the progression, again, up to 2 years, which 2 years of your life without a device attached to your body is meaningful to a kid, to an adult, to whomever. Maybe and lastly, I'll just mention insulin affordability, right? At the forefront of affordability, which is a huge part of our agenda. Being able to get insulin, the cost of insulin was pretty ridiculous, right? And dare I say sinful. But being able to get insulin vials down to $35 a vial, again, a huge part of our agenda, huge success for the organization. So, devices, drugs, affordability, those are all part of our agenda for sure.
Well, that's impressive, and that's a wide scope. Feels like you're attacking every angle you can, and hoping they're all successful, maybe one breaks through.
Obviously the ultimate goal is a cure for the disease.
Yep.
It is not easy to understand, therefore not easy to cure, right? But amazing researchers all over the world studying this, and really proud of the work that this organization does.
May I ask, the affliction rate, and you do highlighted twice that we always need to remember this is a global issue, not just a national issue.
Right.
And the rebranding was a way to focus and bring everybody in. That's wonderful to think through. Are the population numbers increasing, steady state, decreasing? Is it sizing?
Yeah,
Is it,
definitely increasing, which is kind of the shock factor, and more adults are being diagnosed, right? Historically, and again, while we got away from the quote juvenile label, it was generally thought of a child disease, right? But more and more adults are being diagnosed, which, we don't understand why. I have a friend here in Nashville, 50-something years old, that was diagnosed, in their 50s. People are being diagnosed in their 60s. It's pretty crazy,
wow.
But the numbers are certainly increasing. Which is, why our global reach is important.
Well, your hard work has improved a lot of people's lives, so that's wonderful. Thank you.
It's a great team.
So people that want to be involved or want to hear this story, I know there's a number of events, either regional or national, that are hosted by Breakthrough T1D. What are those events, and how could they pay attention to them?
Yeah, great. Thanks for that question. Let's see. I'll start with a Promise Gala. Classic black tie event held at the Omni this year, I believe on April 25. That's probably our signature event.
For the Tennessee chapter of
Correct.
Breakthrough T1D.
That's right.
Nashville.
That's
Okay.
right. Yep. Because we do those galas. Those galas are done all over, lots of major cities in the U.S. That's first one I'll mention. Second, a walk, right? If you're not a black tie person, certainly like many organizations, we too have a walk event. That has been done, it bounces around. It's been at the zoo, it's been at Titan Stadium. I'm not sure exactly where that is this year, but that's always an opportunity to get engaged.
What month is that in?
That is like in the fall, October-ish, something like that.
Good time for a walk.
Yeah. Thirdly, probably my passion project has become the ride, right? I've started doing these breakthrough charity rides, probably in 2012. I've done 16 centuries with Breakthrough, formerly JDRF, I think. But, you know, if you're a
cyclist ride.
Cyclist ride, yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. So,
I like you look like a Harley guy.
great, yeah, I can pull it off.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we have, 5 sites this year where we'll be hosting. These are destination rides. Great experience, great event. Forces you to train, which is kind of why I do it. You can't get out and ride 100 miles without training, so forces me to train.
Well, being the face of it and wearing the logo, you can't be last in the pack. So I'm sure that makes
fun.
sense. Get you out there. Well, thank you. I have been to many of these events.
Yes,
I think
you have.
the world of it, and we'll continue to support and love hearing the success projects. And I think that's where a lot of people miss. There's a lot of charities that are doing great things, but it's hard to quantify the success.
That's right.
And you guys are in a really exceptional position to have, as you mentioned, the device, the pharma development, and the pharma cost impact that are truly 3 equally distinct measurable functions of where these dollars and where this support goes to. So, yes, sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Couple personal fun questions. Favorite band of all time?
Yeah, this is a hard one. I'm a washed-up drummer, and
I did not know that.
had I followed my passion, I'd probably be playing in a band on Lower Broad, but wasn't bold enough to follow my passion. I'm gonna go. I don't know. I'm gonna say Maroon 5. I don't know.
Okay.
I love Adam Levine. I love their music. You know, they're still cranking out good music. I saw them again in Bridgestone a few months ago.
Oh, wow.
I think Songs About Jane is probably I know every word to every song on that album.
All right. I'm going to hit it back up. Favorite music venue? And you can do national or Nashville. Actually, let's do both.
I'm going to say the Station Inn.
Station Inn.
Station Inn, for those that don't know.
Which we're very lucky that it still exists with all the development around it.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, I think that's amazing. I remember, I don't know, I forget the name of the book, but there's a book I used to read to my kids about this man who wouldn't sell his home, and he ends up with all these skyscrapers beside his tiny little home, and that's the Station Inn, right? I mean, they
feels like the movie Up.
Well, there you go. There you go. Yeah, yeah. And stick it to the man, right? Refuse to sell. I used to play at the Station Inn before the Gulch was the Gulch. It was a scary place. At 2 a.m., you wouldn't want to go out to your car by yourself.
A little different now.
A little different now, but I love the fact that they didn't sell. They kept the tradition alive, and I still love bluegrass.
Well, I do. I love that venue as well, and I have nervously watched the development around it, hoping there wasn't a sign on the door one day.
Yeah.
So great call, Matt. All right, out of left field here. What is one change you would make to any sports league to improve it? And if you're looking for an example, mine would be you can only change pitchers one time in a Major League Baseball game per inning.
Yeah, I think a pitch clock helps, right? I mean,
big time.
Yeah. I'm going to say, I mean, only because we're coming off the national championship from NCAA football this past Monday night. You know, this sounds crazy to even say, but I'm going to say a salary cap in college football.
Wow. Yeah.
Which is
those
not
are words
popular.
we would not have
I know, right?
thought to say.
I mean, yeah, I think I used to love college football because, you know, watching these kids play for heart was very meaningful, and that's just not the case anymore. And
you still got the service academies. They're not taking money.
There you go.
That's about it. We got one game a year, or 3 rather. So
it'll probably never happen, but you know, I think college football is just out of control right now.
Well, Karey, thank you so much. You're an exceptional person professionally and personally. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us and share your thoughts.
It's been very fun.
Much appreciated.
And an honor.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.